So I know a lot of people have been asking me to try out new hardcore Roblox games, especially ones that feel similar to Debuggen. And well, this is one I got asked to play today. It's called Archived, right? And it is a game in open testing, so you have to join the group in order to play it, right? Now, what is this game? Archived is basically a permadeath game based on the Project Moon series, right? It's a 3D parry-based game with actually a couple interesting mechanics. When you first join, you can basically create your character, and it gives you some abilities and a starting weapon to use and a faction to join, right? And basically what I'd say the goal of the game is just to become stronger, right? Increase your grade by ranking up. This can be done by doing different sorts of quests, fighting NPCs, and doing these like dungeons, right? And well, some of these dungeons you enter are permadeath, as well as some servers actually being permadeath, which will wipe your character. Now, let's get into, is it actually a good game? Well, let's first break down the good things about the game, right? First off, I actually do like the combat. I don't think it's very clunky, right? Which I think is really good, because I feel like a lot of games that try to have parry-based combat can end up feeling clunky, but this one I think feels pretty good, pretty smooth whenever I was fighting people, right? It does have criticals, dive attacks, charge attacks, and running attacks, right? These are all just inherent to the kit you already spawn in with, right? And the clashing mechanic, which is like if, for example, you use one ability and somebody else uses their ability, I think that's pretty interesting, right? You can also clash criticals, for example, which I think is also very cool. And I also really like how the abilities in general work in the game. You actually have to land M1s to get this thing called light in order to use your skills, which actually I think is great, because it just prevents, you know, a bunch of skill spam. You actually have to think on what ability you want to use instead of just using it as soon as it's off cooldown, right? So yeah, I actually really like that it forces the M1 and parry trades, which is really nice. And the parry cooldown is actually pretty long too, so you're not just having like constant back-to-back parries. Now, it does clear up if you do land a parry, right? But it's also very easy to like force out a feint, for example, or force out a parry by like kind of feinting by not attacking or delaying your M1s a little bit, delaying your abilities. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can do to basically get your opponent to mess up their parry and whiff, which can put on like a 4-second cooldown, and it can change depending on this thing called traits, but I'll explain that later. But basically what I'm trying to say is that your parry matters a lot, and I really like that because you can get in big combos, right? Now there's something called like the Sin system, right, which is basically all these like different status effects that you can get by leveling up and ranking up, essentially, right? Which is really nice. You just invest points and you get like these different trees, which give you these different sorts of builds you can make. And it's also nice that you can re-roll these points. It's not like in Deep where you just get stuck with these points forever, right? You can actually re-roll them, right, and try out different builds, which I think is really, really nice, right? And in general, it's actually nice that you can just like swap out weapons, abilities, and investment points. But it can be kind of annoying to switch those things, but again, I'll get more into that later. Now, the game also gives you 5 slots on your account, which is also really nice. Again, just giving off the idea that, yo, you want to be trying out different builds, right? It's okay to have different slots, maybe one wipes, you still have the others to go back to. All right, I think that's really, really nice. And there's also really, like, this is probably one of my favorite parts. There's actually good, strong NPCs, right? Like, I actually really like when a game has, like, good NPCs that can actually, like, mess you up really badly. I hate games that are just, like, you can just click and not even think about fighting them. These, I think NPCs, initially, they were messing me up, I can't lie. Then you start to get the humanoid bosses, or not bosses, but the humanoid NPCs down a little bit, right? And then they start bringing up the real, like, monsters and, like, actual, like, tough humanoid NPCs, which I really, really like. These guys actually do chunk your health, which is what I think should be always happening when you fight NPCs. You should always be, like, scared to make mistakes on them, because I think that's what makes a good NPC fun to fight, right? And I also really like the monsters. I hope I see more of them, right? And the monsters are pretty tough to fight. I can't even lie to you, but I think that makes it great. I think monsters should always be scary. I also like that some of the content also is aimed towards having multiple people try and take it on, right? Like, you want to feel a little bit more encouraged. You can solo stuff in this game, right? But I will have to say that I do think the solo experience is definitely worse. I mean, that's probably for a lot of games, but in general, I think that there's a couple, like, for example, dungeons where, like, yo, you probably want to go in with friends because it's just more safer to go in with friends since it's a permadeath environment. And just in general, the permadeath environments, like the library dungeons, if you die once, that's it, you're done, right? Servers also becoming a permadeath area, right? It's interesting how it works. If you are below grade 3, basically, you have 3 lives, right? But if you're above that, you have 1 life, which is, like, pretty crazy, right? And it's also, like, there's content behind wiping players in game with the PD system, which I think is like, dang, like that makes it really, really interesting. But I also like that in these PD servers, even if you do end up wiping, right, because there's a lot of people who may end up wiping, right, if you prog in these PD servers, you get way more loot and way more EXP. So it's almost encouraging people who are usually would never be in like a place like the depths, for example, in Deepwoken. It's encouraging them to like go in these PD servers because prog is really, really fast there. And as long as nothing goes wrong, you can progress really, really quickly. But let's get into some of the bad things, right? For starters, I think no real tutorial at the start is kind of a mess up. I did hear that it's a dev choice, right, that they didn't want to have a tutorial, but at the end of the day, people are just going to look up what to do at the start of the game anyway. So like, what's the real point of like trying to hide 10 seconds, like a 10-second Google search, right? It's just going to make it feel way smoother if you just give literally just like the gist of what to do. Because you know, when I first started playing, I didn't really have any clue what I was doing for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then I kind of got the hang, right? Why even have that 10 to 15 minute wait period for people who don't want to search up tutorials or want to experience the game like that, right? If people are just going to look it up anyway, might as well just have it in the game. I think it would just make the game a lot smoother. And then, of course, like there's already going to be hardcore aspects in the game later on regardless and as you're playing. So I just say, you know, just to make ease in players into that environment. I feel as if progression can get a little bit tedious, right? You can be doing a lot of the same thing in order to prog, especially when you're wiping your slots. Now, I understand that, you know, permadeath servers, and there's ways you can progress a lot faster in the game in order to just speed past that process, but that doesn't mean that sometimes it cannot be tedious. It's just faster, right? So I understand that that could also be a constant issue, right? Because I think there's only 3 dungeons at the moment, right? But hopefully over time there'll be more and more things to do, especially at the start, because I feel like you can kind of be stuck doing the same like few things. You have to like clean up some stuff or like do like some like, you know, just pretty boring tasks in order to really start getting into the bulk of the game, which is you wanting to fight NPCs, right? There's also a lot of FPS drops. I don't really know what was going on there. Just like as we were, like me and my friends were fighting people, right, we would just get random FPS drops. This was only in the overworld servers. In the dungeons, 240 FPS. In the main world, I had like 70 FPS. So something really bad's happening there. Hopefully that gets fixed up, some optimization there, but it can kind of hinder the experience sometimes, especially if you're finding some pretty strong NPCs, right? Now, there's also a couple of strange design choices, in my opinion. Like, you're just forced to look at the Trello for a lot of stuff, like a lot of things. Like if you don't have a Trello or wiki on like your second monitor or like on your phone, right, you're just gonna miss out on a lot of stuff, and I don't think that's really good. I didn't even know you could change your controls. Apparently you can change your controls, but I was told that literally hours into the game. Like, why isn't that something that I'm immediately able to know off rip, right? There's like this item called like the what is it called, the golden bow, right? And in order to use it, you need to know the name of stuff in order to get any benefit out of it. It's just like, why even have that when you could just, it would just be better if it just listed out at least the names of stuff. So like, if they want to keep it mysterious and, you know, you want to experiment with it, at least have the names there that you can click on, right? Because what ends up happening, again, people are just going to look up what each thing does, which is what I did. I didn't want to figure out which of the names were what. So I just looked it up. I found out which of the traits I could get from the golden bows, and I got the best ones. And I don't think that's a really great system if most people are going to be doing that. Just have it there because people are going to be doing it anyway. So I mean, just make it a lot less of a hassle having to look stuff up. Because I think that would just make it way better. And yeah, I just think it's just not a great experience for people who are hopping on for the first time. And it just, again, it always just forces people to do that most of the time, right? I also think swapping out your abilities is just a lot more convoluted than it needs to be, right? Basically, you have to essentially get rid of all your abilities, right? You can only have a max of 5, right? And then you have to buy these books, and then you have to basically like pick every single ability you want again. I just think it's just a little bit slow. I think it feels just like a good bit faster. It'd be a lot more enjoyable just to try different things out, because I dread having to, if I just only want to change out one ability, I have to get all 5 back again, which is so annoying. I just wish I could just switch out one instead of having to do all 5, for example, right? There's also a lot of bugs, but those will probably be fixed in due time. Again, the game is in open testing, but there were a lot of bugs I was encountering, right? Like, for example, I would knock an NPC and the NPC's anti-gank, which I do appreciate, by the way, but the NPC's anti-gank would be proccing. The guy would be S-holding while he's knocked. He shouldn't be moving, right? Just small stuff like that that can just be a little bit annoying, but it's not the end of the world, but again, should be fixed. Now, again, I could mention content, right? There are 3 dungeons, right? Like, I think the warp train, the train ticket, and the library. Obviously, there's not going to be a lot to do at the moment, but these are the most fun parts of the game for me, and ganking, of course, right? I really hope that they like stick to adding just more really good like permadeath dungeons or hardcore dungeons, because those are the most fun part for me, especially doing it with friends. And I really hope they add more monsters, because that is like, it's just very enjoyable to fight. Like, I don't mind fighting some humanoid bosses that are strong too, right? But you know, in general, I think that having to fight some of the monsters is like just really fun. Now, I'm not really going to talk too much about the end game. Again, I actually did have the ability to unlock ego, but I kind of messed it up, right? But I will say that based on what I was seeing, there's a lot of end game variety and like the sort of egos you can get. If I had to basically correlate to something, it'd basically be like your bell in debooking, right? There's just a lot of different choices that you can have, which I think is really cool. And again, you can just freely swap out with the golden bows what ego weapon you want, which I think is really nice. And I know there's also even further like super rare endgame content like the singularities, right? And I know that like a lot of people will end up having to grind for those, so I'm glad that there's at least a bit of an endgame grind there. And yeah, I think overall though, those are pretty much all the good and bad things I had to say about the game. Overall, I think it's a pretty cool game. Obviously, for, I guess, Project Moon fans, they're probably going to enjoy it a ton. For your average debugking player, though, I do think that there needs to be a good bit more content added before it's a game you can play regularly. And what I mean that is like a daily game. I do feel as if you were to play this game every single day for like a week or two, you would probably run out of content before like you're like, damn, like, okay, what's the next thing to do? So again, hopefully they focus up on those dungeons. Hopefully they focus up on some new mobs to fight, fix up those bugs. But besides that, I think the game has a lot of potential. The game already has like 4 or 5K players. That's a good sign to me. I mean, hey, people are enjoying the game. Just a few things with the onboarding there, but besides that, not too bad. I think I'll probably play this game every single now and then whenever they add a new dungeon. That's gonna be all, guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.